Good evening. Welcome to the annual Archives Collection Launch Event 2026 edition. I'm Gokul. I work at the Archives. I mostly look after the public engagement programs at the Archives. And it's very exciting to welcome you all for this year's annual Collections Launch event. Just to give you a sense of what's happening this fine evening. So there's 6 of us representing the larger archives team. We'll be taking you through how and what we do at the archives and what happened this past year at the archives at NCBS. We'll keep it under an hour, and after that we'll head out for tea, coffee and snacks at Hottest Garden, and then of course the launch of our new exhibition team by our conservation team. So for those of you who are new to us, here's a quick introduction. The Archives at NCBS is a public collecting center for history of science in contemporary India. So we collect across STEM fields, across the country and across a wide range of areas, including science policy, education, activism, citizen science movements, and more. The Archives work simultaneously across 4 key verticals: collecting, preserving, and making materials accessible, and then pushing the frontiers of research, both in archival studies and through research using archival collections. And finally, outreach and education programs, including talks and workshops for students, teachers, and the wider audience. So now with that in mind, what actually happens to the materials that come to the archives at NCBS? So first, receiving materials. We often visit donors and help pack the materials and help courier it back to us. If it's a small enough package, one of us is going to get it by themselves. Sometimes donors also drop off or courier materials directly to us. That way we can keep it preserved at the archives. Donors also sign a deed of gift. This way the records are transferred. This records the transfer of the materials to the archives and enables us to process it and make it publicly available for education and research. So once the material arrives, we carefully take it out of the container and we assess the materials. So we check for any active contamination. Often, there are molds, pests such as termites, and we treat them if it's required. We also record a significant damage that could have occurred to the materials prior to us getting it. Sometimes there are burns, sometimes there are pest marks, moisture damage and all of that. And then assess whether the materials can be handled safely to process them. So once we receive them, it then goes to processing. So now is where the archivists, they make both intellectual and ethical decisions on what materials to keep and how to organize a particular collection, and how to describe it. So basically they're making a catalog that will help people access the material meaningfully at the end of the day. So wherever possible, donors, creators, and also stakeholders, including individuals or communities that are represented in the material, they work with us to provide more context to the materials. So for example, here you see the current and former members of a feminist organization, Saheli, at the archives at NCBS. They're helping us, get a better understanding of the Saheli collection that we have. So, and wherever required, we also have a conservation team. They help treat and stabilize the materials that we have. So once arranged and described, materials are then stored in these acid-free folders and boxes. So each folder is labeled with a title and a unique identifier, a unique number that helps us locate exactly where it is. The box also contains information of the larger collection those folders belong to. These boxes are then stored in these compactors in a very secure room at the archives, which the room is also controlled for temperature and humidity to make sure the materials last for a longer time. So we then digitize most of our materials and support for a long-term support to support long-term preservation, and also to make the materials accessible to a wider audience. So before we make the materials accessible, we carefully review it for sensitivity and provide a tiered access wherever necessary. These are the different levels of access that we have at the archives. So our catalogs and most of our materials are also available for free on our website. This is a website that you can go to, and you can use the search icon to look for a keyword or a term that that interests you and to explore accordingly. Now that brings us back to the four verticals that we began with. We'll now we'll now take you through each of them in more detail. To begin with, collections, how to navigate the website and to find materials. Deepika is here to talk more about that.
So collections are our bread and butter at the archives. As of this year, this is what you can hope to find amidst our collections. You'll find over 4 lakh objects spanning 150 years of history, 15 languages, more than 70 collections. The link above here is where you can find all of the new collections for this year. And the names that you see on the right in blue and on some slides later on are names of archive staff who have worked on particular projects. We are really proud to announce the addition of these oral history interviews. Some are additions to existing collections and others are new collections entirely. And on the right, you see broad subjects that these interviews cover. And if you want to find one of them within the website, you can use the drop-down menu that you see here. So when you you click on a collection, you use the menu over there on the left. You click on the interview that you want. So let's try and locate, for example, the interview of Idris Khan. Idris Khan is a retired Mahout who worked for the Forest Department in Dudhwa National Park. Raza Kazmi did this interview, and we believe it's really important because it captures bottom-up science histories and an overlooked section of knowledge and observations about animal behavior from close quarters, passed down very carefully across generations in Idris's family. So once you click on the interview there, you also see the sessions that show up below. When you select the session that you want, you go to the section that says scope and contents. And when you click on see more over there, you get a summary of the interview as well as timestamps to help you navigate the recording. To listen to the actual, so this here, for example, is a timestamp. And at the 35-minute roughly mark, it says understanding traits of an elephant, and we'll listen to that in a second. To listen to the file, you click on the button that says go to digital file and you play it from here, and you can select whatever part you want to start from.
कुछ लोग कान की लो से उम्र देखते हैं, हम गाल की झुर्रट से बता देंगे कि हाथी की उम्र क्या है। अच्छा, कैसे? इसका एक तजुर्बा होता है। ये जो सीने की खाल है, इसको कितना झूल जाना चाहिए, कब झूलना चाहिए, गाल में झुर्रट कब पड़ जाना चाहिए, ये सब जब आप किसी अच्छे महावत के साथ रहेंगे तो वो आपको बताते रहेंगे। आंख देखें हाथी का आंख देखें आप, तो आंख से पता चल जाएगी कि इसकी क्या उम्र होगी।
So next up, I'd like to play a clip from an interview with G. Bhamati, a theoretical physicist who was born in 1938. She turns 88 this year, and she spent 25 years teaching at the University of Madras. She eventually became the acting head of the physics department there, which was fairly rare for a woman at the time, before she left for the US in the early 90s to continue her career. Amazingly and unusually for her time, Bhamati has a number of beautiful photos of herself and other classmates who studied physics with her in the 50s, 60s, and onwards. Here you listen to Bhamati recount what it was like during World War II as a child. She talks about a time that she can remember in 1944 as roughly a 6-year-old, when people were debating whether or not to evacuate from Chennai because there were fears that a bomb would be dropped. And the fear for her immediate family was slightly less because they lived in Vijayawada at the time. But her grandparents were in Chennai, so she shifted between the two places, and this is Bhamati.
What I remember is that apparently the bomb fell somewhere near Chennai port, but no great damage. But because of that, they had built all these trenches. And I remember when we went to Chennai, it was a great fun for us to play hide and seek with all that and so on. So that I knew about the bomb and bombing this thing, and people had to sit in trenches and things like that. But at that time, I think we were young enough not to really feel it.
Yeah, next I'd like to play a clip from a really special set of interviews. The first of its kind at the archives. It's a collection of 45 interviews with 45 members of the Puruik community from 5 villages in East Kameng in Arunachal Pradesh. The sago palm is grown by this community, and it plays a really important role in their culture. The recordings in this collection are varied. They include life history interviews with elders, interviews about cultivation practices and processing of the palm to make starch and other items, songs, and the community's oral literature, which relates to the palm and other aspects of ethnobotanical knowledge. The interviews in this collection are in the Puroic language. They're also in Arunachali Hindi, and sometimes they shift between the two. As far as we know, there is only one other publicly accessible repository of the Puroic language. And this particular repository was created with the participation of members of the community. They have direct access to these interviews themselves. And their hope is that in recording these interviews, younger generations within the community will remember the language and memorize their oral literature. Hopefully, some of them are joining us online today. And so we have a small section in Hindi presented by Mansi Dhingra, a researcher who conducted these interviews in collaboration with the community. And before I hand over to Mansi, I'd like to play a short clip of a song by Dangma Kaswang, a woman in her early 50s from Byale village, known in the community for her singing.
Apela kako zuida, apela riaiwa eruidaro, kako la buang daro king. Gama hain la ta de king, machiro kanying duida, machiro kanying duida, kako zuidui. Abagarita Belo rosa ruinada, gere la bere ruining daro.
Can we have Mansi, please, online?
हम सबको थैंक यू बोलेगा। आप स्क्रीन में देख सकता है ऑनलाइन व्हाट्सएप से ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं पुरोहित से कई बड़े भैया बड़ी बहन जिन्होंने ये ओरल हिस्ट्री कलेक्शन में अपना नॉलेज को दिया है और साथ में चिंतन शीट और आनंद राणा सिन्हा भी हैं जिन्होंने इस काम को बहुत गाइड किया है। हम लोग साथ में आप सबको ये नया कलेक्शन को दिखाना चाहता है। ये है पुरोहित ओरल लिटरेचर कलेक्शन ईस्ट कामेंग अरुणाचल प्रदेश में कासवांग, मुचीदू, मुचिया और हले क्लैन से लोगों ने बनाने दिया है। इसमें 42 घंटा का रिकॉर्डिंग जमा किया है और 45 लोगों का नॉलेज को जमा किया है। जो पुरोहित कहानी यानी जनरेशन पुरोहित लोग कैसे जी के आया है उसका बारे में, और मिर्ची एक ऐसा पाम ट्री जिसको पुरोहित लोग पालता है और खाने के लिए बे निकालता है उसका बारे में है। ऑनलाइन में मेरा साथ में आका पादोए कासवांग है जिन्होंने ये पूरा काम को बस्ती बस्ती जाकर करने दिया है। पुरोहित कहानी बच्चा लोग के लिए जोड़ देगा बोल के बहुत मेहनत से किया है। आका अब्यू कासवांग जिन्होंने रात रात जाके कहानी को याद किया है। आका ख्याक मुचीदू जिन्होंने पुरोहित कहानी कंप्लीट बताया है, और आका अशोक कासवांग, अरुण कासवांग, आई मरी कासवांग, आई मलो कासवांग, आई मनिया मुचीदू जिन्होंने मच्छी बारी बहुत सिखाया है, बहुत बताया है और ट्रांसलेशन में भी बहुत मदद किया है। आप सब हम लोग को अपना कहानी को जानने दिया है, आपको बहुत मन रहा है। नारे गोलो रुएदा गो नारो अमी जजा लता गो पूरी कहानी दंग मीगा दारो। आप सबका नॉलेज जो साल में इकट्ठा किया है उसको आज पब्लिक कर दिया है, नेट में डाल दिया है आर्काइव्स का वेबसाइट में। आपका भरोसा से पब्लिक को भी इनवाइट कर रहा है। आप पूरी कहानी को सुनिए, जानिए कि पुरोहित लोग कैसे कैसे जी के आया है, मच्छी क्या है, कैसे पालता है और पुरोहित लोग का कितना नॉलेज है। थैंक यू बोलेगा सबको। नारे गोलो रुएदा। I will hand it over to Anjali now, who will take you through the archival collections. Thank you.
Hello, I'll be doing a run through of about 20 collections. Sorry. Can you hear me better now? Okay, great. Hello, I'll be doing a run through of about 20 collections that we have launched over the past year at the archives. I'll be picking out images and objects which capture the kind of material within these collections. I encourage all of you to scan this QR code or go to this link to access our catalog and browse through the material. If you do want to make additional descriptions or inevitably spot an error, do reach out to us. archiving is highly rewarding hands-on work, but we do chug through large amounts of data every year, trying to make sense of it while making it accessible to users. It's tedious, iterative process. Building comprehensive, usable catalogs require both archivists and users, and we would love more input and suggestions from all of you. Since 2023, we've been building a sizable collection of papers from ecologists, conservationists, and wildlife protectors. Most of it has been material from birders and ornithologists, and there's a nagging worry that we're building a bird archive. But I think this year we have managed to catalog more diverse material. We have graduated to flowers, trees, and amphibians. Virendra Kumar is a botanist who worked on forest biodiversity in the Himalayas. His papers cover his work as a teacher and researcher and his work with Chipko movement. The collection also has beautiful images of flowers and trees in the Himalayan valley he had taken on his travels. Ranjit Daniel's papers have illustrations of fishes and amphibians, like you see here, alongside his research work at CES. We have some big cats in the archive now, thanks to the papers of Sanjay Dev Roy, an officer in the Indian Forest Service who worked on Project Tiger. We have material from TNA Perumal, a renowned wildlife photographer from Bangalore. A set of tributes and certificates are part of the collection. You'll notice that he's won practically every award, from the Baltimore Sunday Sun to the Tenali Camera Club. The breadth and reach of Perumal's work is something we should all aspire for. My favorite objects are a set of 20 folders with photographs of Lal Bagh taken over 20 years ago. If you're from Bangalore or love the city, I encourage you to take a look at them. It documents life and leisure in the city. Perhaps you might spot yourself or someone you know in these photos. Just when we thought we had dodged the birds, we have the biggest one of them all, the papers of Salim Ali, known as the Birdman of India. Here's a picture of Ali receiving an award from Indira Gandhi and Prince Philip. We have letters between Ali and other birders. This is from the Nazi ornithologist Erwin Stressman in the 1930s. And this amusingly detailed letter to Dylan Ripley, where Ali asks him about two Mexican birds they had spotted years ago in Los Angeles. And I quote, when we visited some chaps' collections. Physics is another subject we cover in the archives. We have the papers of Matthew Potan Tekekara, a physicist who worked at NASA Goddard and was also a Jesuit priest. It's an extraordinary collection where Thomas Aquinas' light of reason appears side by side with equations related to the inverse square law of light. We have our first experimental physicist in Vasant Natarajan, whose papers chronicle his career at IIC Bangalore. We also have papers of P.C. Vaidya, an astrophysicist who was known for being a Gandhian and a math educator, working on popularizing mathematics in the vernacular. We have whole sets of newsletters and writings on mathematics in Gujarati, thanks to this collection. We have added more material to the K.S. Krishnan collection. K.S. Krishnan was the co-discoverer of the Raman effect and worked as a scientific administrator in post-independent India. This set of material is related to nuclear non-proliferation, chronicled through the Pugwash conference as well as collaborations with Japan. We have the first chemistry collection in the Jivanu papers of Krishna Bahadur and S. Ranganayaki, two chemistry teachers and researchers at University of Allahabad, who in the 1950s and 60s were trying to figure out how life originated on Earth. They were trying to recreate in their lab what J.B.S. Haldane poetically called the primordial soup. We have more material from the Narmada movement, including a whole set of photographs showing indigenous leaders, activists, and people who had participated in the movement. Also in the collection are meticulous handwritten notes kept by Shripad at the Narmada hearing in Supreme Court, and administrative and publicity material that question the scientific, social, and economic mandate of the Sardar Sarovar project. We also have papers from Saheli, a feminist organization from New Delhi. The papers sent to us primarily deal with Saheli's involvement in the autonomous women's movement, where they worked on women's reproductive rights. Through letters, minutes of meetings, publicity material, legal documents, and reports, they chalk out women's resistance to state-mandated population control measures. In the V. Siddhartha papers, we have our first documents related to science and technology policy in India. We have new additions in the Chandita Mukherjee papers. Chandita Mukherjee was a filmmaker who worked on science films in India. Additions in the collection include letters and scripts and administrative material detailing Indian Space Research Organization's work with instructional satellite television in India through programs such as SITE and INSAT. Through our friends, we've been receiving a steady trickle of material from researchers and scholars from our neighboring university, UAS. This includes the thesis of Mushtaq Ali, who was known as the Ant-Man of India. We thought we had all the letters sent by Leslie Coleman, the first director of agriculture in Mysore state. When he was visiting India in 1953, he made sure he sent at least one letter home every single day. We now have an additional Christmas Day letter from Coleman to his family in this collection. The MS Swaminathan collection also has new editions, including this commemorative stamp released by the government in recognition of the Green Revolution. We have a new sub-series of material related to his spouse, Meena Swaminathan, who was also a pioneering educationist. We have new volumes of Vigyan Karmi, a journal from the Association of Scientific Workers of India. We have a new set of journals from the Association of Medical Women in India, which I admit does sound really boring. But if you ever run out of insults in the middle of an argument, I suggest you look up this article on views of traditional midwives and OBGYN doctors in India. What you will realize is that they have more in common with each other than they think. They are bound by mutual hatred. The journal itself has pretty unabashed and candid views on medical practice in India, but this one takes the cake. I do not condone what is being said here. From doctors calling midwives those ingrained with bad habits, as superstitious, unhygienic, unscientific old women with magical thinking. But don't worry, the midwives do give it back in the next paragraph, calling doctors rude, insolent, irreligious, stealers of clients, concluding that it's dangerous to have to deal with such people. I hope that does convince you to check out our collections. There's always something in the collections to keep you hooked and always something to take away. Thank you. I'll now hand over to my colleague Nisha, who will be talking to us about the Archives Regrant program called PAST, Program for the Archiving of Science and Technology in India.
Hi, everybody. The Program for Archiving of Science and Technology, henceforth PAST, was a year-long program that was launched in February of 2025. As you can see on the slide, it was done to enable digital access to collections that are rare, endangered, and of archival value, which are related to the history of science and technology of contemporary India. In other words, it aims to document multiple narratives and perspectives that are at risk and often overlooked from archival representation. This first of its kind program in India worked towards enabling digital access for the public to diverse ways of understanding the culture of science and technology. The digital material for 26 collections originating from 8 past projects will be part of the digital archive run by the archives at NCBS, while the original archival material stay at their places of origin. 23 out of these 26 collections are being launched today. Allow me to give you quick introductions to the 8 past projects in alphabetical order of the grantee organizations. Advanced Media Productions project, titled History of Media Technology from a Jungle of Meaning, was about audiovisual media industry in Delhi from the early 1970s to 2000, about an experience of practice ignored in discussions about histories of technology. Conservation Indica worked with the nomadic pastoralists of Gujarat in their project titled Pastoral Legacies, Digitizing Maldhari Heritage and Ecological Wisdom. Their project highlights the ecological knowledge, relation to land, and shifts in land rights, resource access, and conservation in Saurashtra. They have archived oral histories and artifacts from pastoral elders, conservationists, and civil society groups, active since the 1980s. Lab Hopping Science Media Forum carried out a project titled Archiving Histories of Science from Mangalore. By archiving material sourced from individuals and libraries in Mangalore, Lab Hopping's project offers glimpses into the scientific ecosystem of the region from the late 1800s to the late 1900s. Their project explores, as modern science sought footing in a new landscape, how did the social, cultural, and political realms contend with this new way of viewing the world? Next, we have a project titled Ancestral Knowledge and Science, among North Maharashtra's indigenous people, carried out by Maharashtra Prabodhan Seva Mandal. This project delved into the rich tapestry of traditional ecological knowledge held by the Adivasi communities of North Maharashtra, who have for generations nurtured a profound understanding of their environment and its intricate ecological dynamics. Up next, we have a project by Nature Conservation Foundation titled Archiving Publications of the Bengal Natural History Society. This project was based in Darjeeling. There, exactly a century ago in 1926, Bengal Natural History Society began publishing their journals. Their 50 years of documentation, especially of wildlife in eastern and northeastern India, is unparalleled. This project has found and archived these lost publications and brought them back to the public eye, filling knowledge gaps for this region's ecology over a transformative period of its history. Up next, we have a project that was archiving records of community action on women's and queer rights by Partners for Law in Development. They worked to develop the existing feminist law archives accompanying the Delhi High Court intervention by Voices Against 377 for decriminalizing homosexuality and the documentation of community interventions by Sehaj on sexual and reproductive rights. Setu carried out a project titled STEM Knowledge in the Donavur Fellowship, Southern Tamil Nadu. Setu's project foregrounds educators' overlooked role in advancing STEM knowledge, shaping the Donavur Fellowship, Southern Tamil Nadu, into a center for field-based research, experimentation, and innovation into the natural and environmental sciences and climate-responsive architecture. And then we have Preserving and Digitizing Marginalized STEM Histories of Jammu and Kashmir by University of Jammu. This project documents underrepresented STEM histories in Jammu and Kashmir and India, ensuring longevity and wider accessibility of invaluable resources like books, theses, pamphlets, etc. And with that, we have the past program, class of 2025 to 26. I worked on the project in a Nature Conservation Foundation, and I was also part of the project I'll be talking about next, which was metadata archiving at the archives in NCBS. Over the past year, we had 4 metadata archivists join us. Each of them came to us with specialized training or having had done work on certain specific subject areas or fields. They spend their time with us reviewing individual collections, updating their descriptions, reviewing it, and creating more metadata than any archiving content management system would allow, and also putting together resources and workflows that archivists can adopt every time a similar collection from a similar subject or field comes to the archives. If you have any questions about this work, do reach out to Janaki, who worked on space science, Priscilla, who worked on biology, Vinay, who is working on indigenous data, and me, Nisha, who's worked on ecology. For our next piece of work, we move on to the use of archival material. The archives at NCBS aims to make much of its archival material freely accessible. But viewing stuff on the archives page is different from using it for your work later. The archives does not always own rights to material, but we are taking one of the first baby steps in India to set guidelines for use of archival material. Check out our use levels tested out on one collection, the Jivanu papers that Anjali mentioned, which was launched just over a month ago. I would like to hand now over to Ojas, who will take us through.
In this past year, we started work on research guides for our collections. The research guides are intended as a starting point to explore the growing collections at the archives at NCBS. We envision these research guides as maps made by archivists and previous users of archives at NCBS, showing possible routes to navigate the collections. They offer ways of drawing connections across materials at the archives. These guides are broadly categorized by subject, geography, and themes. Over the last year, Deepika and Anjali published a paper sharing their experiences of trying to bring in more collections from women and to make archival material from women within our existing collections more visible. The paper was part of a set of articles based on work first presented at a workshop on science archives held by the ICA, International Council on Archives, and UCSF in San Francisco in 2024. And the publication is co-edited by Venkat, who was part of the organizing committee. We also hosted a conference workshop in May last year called Archiving Like a Feminist, which saw artists, academics, activists, and archivists coming together to talk about archives. We also hosted a workshop as part of SCCS last year, which is the Student Conference on Conservation Science. The workshop introduced participants to archival research methods and ways to integrate archival data into contemporary ecological research and practice. It also explored ethics and care principles in working with the community and indigenous knowledge, and concluded with a hands-on exercise of using archival records. We began our scholars program towards the end of 2024, and in the last year we have had 10 researchers from fields including environmental history, visual anthropology, and wildlife biology using material from the archives in their own work. The word cloud here represents their subjects of study. We are coming up on a year of our education program for schools with the aim of encouraging high school students and teachers to use archives. We have had 2 education officers, Carol and Sahamata, We have been working with teachers. Earlier this year, a group of teachers made a set of plays using archival material. We also have been working with scholars to develop a guide using archives in school education. We also have been doing school visits. Some students have also visited us, like this group of smartest high schoolers you will ever meet from the New Learning Center, Raipur. Meanwhile, on campus, Samira Sheikh, the current OS chair, has been running a series of informal sessions with students, staff, and the general public called Historian in the House. Today, we relaunch our until now print-only magazine, The Silverfish, as a website that you can browse through. In this new form, our magazine, we attempt to convey the texture of what it's like to work with archival material, whether as an archivist or as a researcher. Last year, we had our first exhibition done in-house, which offered visitors the chance to play with perspectives from scientists, archivists, and artists, as well as their own, to explore how meaning is made from fragments that enter the archives. We continued our long-running lecture series on history of ideas with some special guests over the year. These are talks framed around explorations in and around archives, with discussions by artists, archivists, academics, lawyers, teachers, journalists, and more. Dr. Preeta Nair, a historian of science, was the fourth Obey chair at NCBS. She gave a series of talks at different venues across the city in July. We are also releasing our new merch for the launch. When you head to the archives later, do remember to pick up some fun bookmarks, postcards, and zines. Lab 18 in ELC is where the magic happens, where we process material before it makes its way to the storage. You may never again meet a group of people so enthusiastic about shelving. Our processing space is now moving to the first floor of the new stores building. During our collections launch event last year, we announced development of an archives annotation tool. And in this past year, we have worked on building a prototype, which is now live for public testing. And it also has a new name now, Anomaly. Anomaly is a web-based tool that allows its users to add annotations to archival descriptions. To demonstrate the platform, we have created a representative of an archives aggregator catalog, cat.mili.link. And for the collections that are from the archives at NCBS, digital files are retrieved from the host at collections.archives.ncbs.res.in. Mouthful. When you find a folder on the catalog, you'll be presented with a nifty button called anno.mili, which will take you to Anomaly, where it loads the catalog metadata and digital objects from the source archive, in this case, archives at NCBS. When you scroll down, you will see a list of annotations contributed by the public. We have the ability to add 4 types of annotations, commonly known. We have subject headings, subject annotations, free text descriptive annotations, names of people, collectives, organizations, corporations, called agent annotations. And what is that we are looking here? It mentions agriculture and taxation and calmness and happiness in the same place. Emotion annotations allows one to register one of 9 emotional responses with high and a low weight. The last one in this list is for our 21st century Stoics who walks among us. Well, there have been many far more ambitious annotations projects before. A few who have managed to develop products around it for academia, writing, and journalism. Anomaly, to my knowledge, is the first of its kind annotation project for archives. Feel free to head over to cat.mili.link, find a folder that you like, and click on that Anomaly button to annotate on anno.mili.link. For Anomaly, we would like to thank Manas, Atman, Denny, and Tarunima at Tattle, who have spearheaded the development, the steerers and supporters of Mili Archives Foundation, and to Arcadia for funding the software development. Our discussions early on with Thomas and Mariella at Caltech Archives and Special Collections guided us in thinking about the scope of our project, while Liz Steinfurt and Dibyaduti Roy at Leeds for inputs on developing emotion annotations as part of our prototype. Thank you, and I will pass on to Venkat for more thank yous.
It's hard to follow the act of an emoji doing that, but I'll try this anyway. Thanks so much to all of you for being here. My job is the easiest and the most pleasurable, which is to thank all of you and thank a bunch of people who have made this possible for us. The work that we do cannot possibly happen without people who trust us to keep and take care of this material. So really thank you to more than 180 donors. Some of you are in the audience, some of you are joining online. And we're very, very grateful that you trusted us to take care of this for generations to come, and we hope we can do that. Our work is, of course, not possible without the people who fund us, who make this possible. NCBS, of course, which has been a strong anchor in thinking about the history of science and has been sort of shaping the vision of the center. The TNQ Foundation that came in early, and I think Rohini is in the audience, so thanks so much, and a shout out to Mariam as well for supporting the research that happens in the archive, including the work of the Obaid Siddiqui Chair. And of course, a shout out to Arcadia for, we're concluding our 3-year program with them this year, which is looking at the history of science in contemporary India. It was the first Arcadia funded project outside what you might call the global north. So we're very, very privileged and excited to have worked with them through these last few years. And we look forward to continue to do this kind of work with all our funders and our donors in particular. I do need to give a shout out to our reviewers over the last 3 or 4 years, people from campus, Anjana Archishman, Jayashree, Ranjit, Jitu, Shashidhara, Uma and Vidya, who've all sort of anchored the work that we do within the campus. And of course, our external committee that keeps us accountable and make sure that we don't go astray. So Anne Fleur, Aprajit, I think some of them have joined online. Indra, Mariella, who's seen this space since for the last, I think, 9 years, and she might even have joined online at an unearthly hour for her. Rochelle, Shubha, and Srinath, who've all been part of this committee over the years. Everything that we do, including this event today, is only made possible by the folks on campus, the support staff that always stays invisible but just gets things going no matter what. So thank you so much to the instrumentation IT team for the work that you've done today, but of course to the civil and the architecture team for shaping the work that and over the years. Everyone who comes to the archive always marvels at the space, and that's really to your credit. As the whole technical services group on campus, the various dean's offices on campus that make this work possible. The tea and coffee that you enjoy after every event is because of the hospitality team that makes this happen. So really, really thanks so much to all of these groups that do this work. I couldn't have asked for a better group of people to work with who bring, in some inexplicable way, care, intent, and skill all together. So thank you to the current team and the teams that have worked with us in the past. These photos seem to indicate that we do nothing but eat and drink, but there's a little bit of archiving that we try and get done during the year. And this group of people have, in this last year, processed about 80,000 objects, 4,000 minutes of recordings, 36 collections, 500 subjects. It is an extraordinary piece of work that everyone's done. They're not alone. There have been more than 100 people who have shaped the idea of the archive over the last 7 years. And to them, we are extremely grateful. They are journalists, writers, historians, engineers, software developers, designers, educationists, architects. And they've all sort of believed in this idea of an archive, and for that, we're very, very grateful, and we hope to continue getting people from different disciplines. Archiving is not a very strong discipline in this country, and we like to pull everyone to the dark side. So thanks so much for being part of this, Steve. Yeah? This is already on the website, yeah. But I just want to take a moment, just step out for a moment and ask, every one of these 80,000 objects comes down to something like this. You're looking at a letter from K.S. Krishnan, the scientist that Anjali spoke about. And on the 23rd of November, 1936, he writes this letter, a draft of which you're looking at, to J.D. Bernal, a scientist whose name many of you in this audience might be familiar with. There is some J.D. Bernal material in the V. Siddhartha papers as well, if you want to do the crosslinks. And he's basically telling him that I want to come to Europe and the UK. I'd like to give a bunch of talks. And just in the passing, he talks about how he's been in touch with Rutherford, again, a name that hopefully the science folks in this audience will understand. And he's saying that I'd like to give a bunch of talks and would love to see what you think of it. That's the starting point for this. This is the starting point for what we see as a 90-year-old experiment in process, memory, and care. And that is true for every archival object that you come across at the archive. In this object, you see histories of science in India, international science, science and society, communism, privilege and networks, interwar period histories, history of crystals, and of course, the history of the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science. But it's written with iron gall ink, which you will see a little bit more about in a moment, on cellulose. And it has carried forth remarkably across 3 generations, across a few steel trunks, across 3 cities, made possible for you to see because of a few chance encounters with a few people across this world. And we're staring at it today. And then comes this process of care. where a bunch of archivists look at it, define value, find meaning in it. They do preserving. So everything that Ojas, Nisha, Anjali, Deepika, and Gokul talked about, you can sort of see distilled in one object. Questions of how do you access it, how do you use it, how do you annotate it, how do we develop research guides to understand the history of privilege in networks, how do you develop curriculum projects like what Sahamata is doing today, how do you do oral interviews to understand how such memory comes across 3 generations now, as Deepika has worked on. The Silverfish project that Dhatri and Shravya have led over the years. Art installations, exhibitions that you can do with such letters. And of course, you could create a bookmark as well. Underlying all of this, of course, is the fact that we need to keep this alive. A letter like this, a letter that is crumbling with each passing day. And that's where this extraordinary team of conservators that we work with come and do their magic. So I'd like to just sort of thank you all for being here. Thanks to the team, and say that we'd love to take you forward now to from Dasheri to the Hortus Garden, where we will have tea and coffee, and we will be launching our new exhibition, Beyond Treatment, which is curated by Sindhu, Kinjal, and Dhanya, who are at the back of the room. And we'd be happy to take questions from anyone. So thanks again. This is the moment someone asks a question.
I thank you all for such an interesting presentation and all the work you do. I guess what I'm curious about is when you receive a box of stuff or a collection of stuff, and you go through the process of sort of cleaning it and then putting it in those folders and then the box that you keep it in. At what point and how do you go through the documents to index them, to identify key words or key ideas that would be useful for somebody who wants to do research on it?
I don't know if Parvati and Sanjana are in the room. I'm just going to put them in a spot. We did this last night. We do the cross-linking and the keyword work right at the end. And that is something that for us is the second life of the archival object, that you can keep finding meaning into the object. And that's something that we can keep doing. And if you go to our website and just look for the subject tags, you will see links across the collections that have been developed by the archivists in the last few months after it's processed. But the initial work of finding value in it, so saying that something is of value to be kept in the archive, is done much earlier in the process. And then right after that, we describe it. So we build the first bridge of discovery for the material so that someone can find it on the catalog. And then you have multiple layers of interpretation that you can develop much later.
Thanks.
So I have again, thank you everyone. It was really so interesting and diverse. It was so nice to see the range of material that you're archiving and valuing. So that was very, very important. So the onus for what comes into the archive is on the people who hand you the archive, or do you at some point say, we're not preserving this?
Sorry, your question is whether or not we say no to collections that come our way?
No, whether or not you say no to something that's in the collection. You know, I have like a huge box of stuff and I give it to you. Should I have sorted it beforehand and decided?
No, I mean, if you sorted beforehand, we would welcome and we would love to work with donors. We generally try and work with donors, but we take care of the whole process usually. We come and appraise at source. And we try and, to the extent possible, define value there and work with the donors to say that this is something that we're going to be keeping. We tend to keep things in whole. So we try and avoid picking a slice of a person. So we try and keep things, as a whole unit. I don't know if others can speak. I should stop there.
Yes.
Collection, conservation, preservation are very rare documents, materials. What the team expects, from next level, how do you think it can be useful to the larger society? How it can be integrated and taken to the next level? I've been long been associated with the archive as a visitor and interacting. So what can be the next level of all these efforts?
Does anybody want to take a shot at this? For us, there's a cyclical thing that we have to look at when it comes to historical material. Every historical object is a distillation of a set of stories. And it has distilled into a thing that we call a physical archival letter or whatever. Then, as you had asked, we start to add layers of interpretation to the object. And once you do that, it starts to live many stories again. So people can use it in exhibitions, people can use it in plays, in research papers. There are many number of ways in which people constantly use material going forward. They derive meaning from it. If you want to understand how the government is invested in education in the rural sector, you need to look no further than look at the SITE program that was an extraordinary example of these endeavors. If you want to understand the history of intersections between countries, for instance, in thinking about policy for that matter, which is very relevant today, it will be useful for you to take a look at, say, the V. Siddhartha papers to understand science and technology policy, for instance. So every collection, it's up to, we can't figure out how an eventual researcher will use it. But if there are researchers in this audience who have used the archive, please tell us how you're using it, or if someone else wants to give it a shot.
Venkat, you told me that you will work with the donor, and the donors will have a story behind each record, or a bunch of records. Do you record them during the collection? Like a oral history during
We did not plant this question, but thanks so much for asking this question. Collection ID OH009 is our first attempt at trying to understand the trail of memory that goes behind the physical record. So we try and record the process of how objects were created, kept, and transferred over, in some cases, a century to reach a thing that we call an archive. So there are two sets of interviews. One with DCV Malik, who may have joined online, I don't see him here in person, who was instrumental in helping us receive the K.S. Krishnan papers. And the other with Vani, with the Saheli organization, to understand the history of how that came here. It's an experiment. We don't know how this will play out. We have two.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you so much. It was fantastic. So I have two questions. One is actually flowing from that question about collections. Since the definition of science has also expanded, motivated by this effort to think beyond the great men of science, I'm sure your collection policy has also expanded for what you take in. And so how do you assess that? And also then, do you say no to collections? Not specific objects in a collection, but to entire collections. The second question was also for oral histories. What was the process like? Did you travel? Or do you find people in other locations to conduct the interviews? So how does that process work? Thank you.
So I can take that question. We are currently writing our archive. We have a rudimentary, not rudimentary, we have a draft of our archives policy. And that's something that we were hoping to flesh out in time for today, but we have not, and we were hoping to make it public, but we're not close to that yet. We do have a rough idea of what the boundaries are for us, and we try to stick within that. So there's three of us who discuss internally whether to bring in a collection or not. So we have a separate WhatsApp group, and we say, okay, fit yes or no. We try to figure that out. There are edge cases for us. It's something where we still are figuring, but we do say no to material because like any archive, we do have limited resources, space. All of that is, these are things we absolutely have to think about. Just 1 second. So the second part of her question about oral histories, we do have we have an idea of what we are looking for. Sometimes oral histories come to us because there's an existing project. Someone has done these. They come to us both because someone already has done these interviews and they're looking for a home for these interviews after the fact. And some of it we actively, we have a wish list of people we'd like to speak to. We prioritize maybe the oldest and maybe most frail people to move down the list before we do. But that's really broadly how we prioritize oral histories.
Okay, I think it's a fantastic question, and thanks for asking that. I think you didn't answer the core question. Let's say she said, beyond great men of science, when you start collecting material from, let's say people, let's not think like ordinary or important people, let's say, right? So where do you set the border that this is part of the history of science, or simply it's collection of some information about some people who lived at that time, right? So for example, one of the oral history, two case studies came. One was Mahout talking about, determining the age of the elephant.
Right.
You can say this is the people history of science. Whereas the other one, a woman singing a song, right? So where do you put a boundary line that it is useful for studying history of science, contemporary history of science, whereas something is nothing to do with science? Of course, yeah, at some point, anything can be connected to science. Being a scientist, I can always say everything is science. But how do you say no to that? This is not relevant to us. It's not about from the policy perspective, the kind you mentioned about. It is from the mission of the archives.
Right. I will say that's not, I don't have a straightforward answer to this. What we try really hard, we're not in the business of defining.
I'm asking myself this question to Venkat so many times. I've asked this.
Right.
I'm sorry, there are certain kinds of material we have, we may procure.
Yeah.
But should we do it just because we are archives?
Right.
Are we not we're just not archives, right? We're also archives of contemporary science of
Yes.
India.
So the way we approach it is really that we are not trying to define what science is and what isn't. I think it's helpful for us to not place a hierarchy also on, say, what scientific research in a science institution versus what, say, traditional knowledge that may be passed down, ethnobotanical knowledge, for example. Or I do think, for example, that the Mahavat, the knowledge is based on empirical observation, and it's something that's handed down. It's a really deep knowledge of animal behavior, among other things. I think what our approach really is to try to have all of these in conversation with each other and not privilege one over the other. And that's probably why you see so many tensions coexisting at the same time. You might have differing voices, differing opinions. You'll see in the archive both government policy on health. You'll see, for example, feminist activist groups opposing certain measures imposed on them. I think what we aim for in the archives is to capture these tensions as opposed to exhaustively document in a single area.
Yeah, I think we're also curious to know what's discussed in that WhatsApp group. What exactly is happening? But thank you so much for your response.
If I may just add one, it's just that generally in archival, when you look at, say, 200 years of at least archival private papers, notability generally tends to surface to the top to say that someone is big and famous. This is the case everywhere. That's one way of looking. Our argument is that notability cannot be the only way in which we assess the history of science in contemporary India. So there needs to be a certain diversity perspective to it. And that really typically means, as Deepika said, histories that have not been seen before. Now, if there is this wonderful situation where there are 200 interviews we have to search from, then we can start talking about notability within that 200. But as of now, there's one. Right? And so you work with the fact there is a certain enduring historical value because there is nothing else like it elsewhere. The same is true for the Purohit community. If there are 2,000 interviews with the Purohit community, then we can start figuring out notability and we can start adding more value layers to that. But till such time, we are perhaps obsessively thinking about diversity of ways of thinking about science.
Yeah. I wanted to check with you. Congratulations on the launch. I saw, archives are usually used by researchers and scientists and all. I also saw you working with schools. Can you touch upon that? How you're working with educational institutions and the younger audience, as you might call it?
Yeah, archives has not been introduced to school at least in India, as according to our knowledge or limited knowledge, I guess. Yeah, but we are trying to look beyond textbooks. That's what we are trying to do, and trying to connect the interest of teachers and the students with the archives. I mean, for every person, I think if you look at our archives, if you put some keywords, like you will get some interesting stuff to talk about, interesting stories to share too. So that's what we are trying to do. We collaborate with teachers and try to understand their interest and try to come up with a curriculum material for their school. It's a very customized thing. Not then we are definitely not working on any large scale program, one solution for every school. No, we are not doing that. We are doing very specific projects. Yeah.
I just wanted to go back to the previous discussion. As the very grateful recipient of the Obaid Siddiqui Chair, I've had the opportunity to talk to the archives team on many occasions, and I have come to realize that their approach to what belongs in this archive and what doesn't is reliant on, as I see it, three factors. There is the donors and their wishes, who may approach the archives either themselves or members of their family, etc. There is the NCBS community, which is the one that provides the space and the premises in which to carry out this work. And the third, and this is where I count myself, is the users of the archives. And the way I've seen these discussions play out, I am not on that WhatsApp group, and I have no desire to be, but I've seen how layered and thoughtful every single one of these decisions is, and how much agonizing the archives team does about it. So they keep all these three constituencies in mind, and they try to make sure that what is represented in the archives is not just the wishes of the donors. And people who make donations themselves to the archives often want notice in posterity, right? So then by recognizing those wishes, who are we leaving out? And I think that question of how do we retrieve and give space to those who have perhaps not achieved the greatest fame, who have not achieved the greatest recognition within what is considered science. I think the space that you all provide to think through those methodological questions and the thoughtful way in which you carry out those decisions is eventually immensely helpful to that third community, which is the users, who then really truly appreciate the diversity of voices and the careful, thoughtful, the metadata that you generate, the ways in which you think about outreach, the ways in which you make connections across the archives. So I don't really have a question here, but I just want to put in my penny's worth as somebody who has this great privilege of seeing both the way these decisions take place, but also has the opportunity to use the archives and to appreciate it for being one of the most, not necessarily the most comprehensive archives in the world, but certainly one of the most thoughtful and idealistic archives I have ever come across. So thank you all.
Congratulations, Venkat and NCBS. I'm Kanal Uday from MEGN Center. I just wanted to put a proposal sort of a thing, taking cue from what the director sir had said. This is regarding the history, that is particularly in science-related history, military history. Why can't we have a common platform in which we can probably use the expertise that you people bring to the table, along with the archival materials which we have got. Like, for example, you mentioned about the Mysore Wars. During the Mysore Wars, Tipu Sultan used a particular weapon and a particular ammunition, which till date is supposed to be the pioneer among the ammunitions. Similarly, there are vases of the 13th century in our museum, which can be probably dated or carbon dated for that matter, and we can have researches on that. How about this idea? I just want to throw it to the director, please.
Sounds great. Yeah, I mean, we can absolutely, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I should also give a shout out to at least, 5 colleagues from various archives across the city who are also joined us in this room. So thanks so much, Priyanka, thanks for joining. Colonel Uday, thank you. I think I see the IAAP folks here. I remember St. John's folks joining earlier. I see Kamra here. So it's, who else am I missing? I hope I'm not missing anyone else who's joined in person. But yeah, this is something that we can absolutely do. We have at least 12 functioning archives in the city. There's no reason why we can't do this. So we'll definitely take you up on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I was intrigued by something in the early slides about access. I think if I remember correctly, there were 4 access categories, the last one being embargo. What does that mean?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We still haven't chalked out our access policy. We were supposed to have that on our website for the general public to access. So there are 4 levels of access in our archive. Like the first level is open digital access. So you can basically view it on our website, you can download it, use it, etc. The second level is material that you send us a request and we'll send you the digital copy. And again, we don't really control how you use it. We hope that you cite us, etc., and you're ethical about your use, but we're not really controlling how that happens. The third level of access is generally that it'll go through a review process. Basically, you send us a request, we'll write to you, etc., and then we function like a traditional archive, right? You look through a catalog, you send in a request, an archivist will review it, and you get access to that material. And the embargoed material is usually material that remains restricted. Users can't access them immediately. This happens either because of donor wishes, like the donor will say that this material, I don't want it accessible to people for the next 30 years. Then you honor the donor wish. Then if the material is sensitive, it contains nudity or it contains violence, then you have a time-based embargo where it gets released. Let's say we follow general rule of the law to determine access. And then there's material that remains restricted because of the fact that it's obsolete. So we just don't have any way to access it right now. We'll need to get equipment and, we'll need to figure that out. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Each access level is available for every object, every folder in the catalog, it'll have an access level. So as a user, you'll know whether it's accessible to you or not. Yes. Right. We do not have any public catalog for unprocessed
You just keep them. You don't process it immediately, but do you say that you have such a collection or not?
So, I don't think we've made any. So normally when material enters the archive, we make something called an accession record, which we update on Archive Space, our content management system. But I don't think any of our accession records are public yet. So that's an internal document. So an archivist here can know what collections have come in, etc., looking at the accession records. But the public cannot know at the moment. We have not published them as yet. Yep.
How does the International Center of Archive help guide or enhance the activities of NCBS archive?
It doesn't help guide it as much. There are various openly accessible policies and guidelines that the International Council on Archives provides that we, gladly take from the web. This Archives at NCBS is a member of one of the sections of the International Council on Archives, so it helps, exchange knowledge with them. Actually, maybe this is too early a plug, but we will be hosting the next conference of that group next year. So we'll be exchanging ideas with different archives across the world on that front. So I think the best way to think of it is it's an exchange of best practices, guidelines, ideas across different communities. There are things that we do in India in different archives that are quite new and unusual and unique that other centers could learn from, and there are things that other centers in other parts of the world that we learn from. So it's like any other exchange of knowledge. At least that's how we've seen it. I don't know if anybody else has any other perspective. Sorry, I feel like I'm also the person who also has to say one last question, and then we are done.
Just last question.
We should.
Will it be of interest for Archive at NCBS to explore and bring out the Kilidi at Madurai, which is which is alive for more than 3,000 years. And Tamil inscriptions have been found in Egypt very recently. And documenting that may be of interest because it is one of the oldest civilizations, and it is Madurai is one of the very few cities in the world which is continuous for all the 3 millennia. And they keep on, evidences are keep on growing. Very recently, they have found inscription in Tamil in Egypt.
Yeah, so we've been reading about this. Maybe this is Shashi. So this would be an example of something that we may not bring here because we are a contemporary archive, but we will try and find the right center to connect them with. That would be an example of something. So there is a sort of a roughly 200-year period that we look at here. It's not set in stone, but okay. All right, I'm sure there might be more questions and conversations that we can continue to have. So we hope you join us for tea, coffee, snacks, and actually coming to see the archive and the exhibition. So follow us to the Hortus Garden. So thanks again. Thanks for everyone.